Thank you, Eric, and welcome again, Joanne, and thank you, Loretta, for inviting her to be with us this evening. This afternoon, I went online to find out how many animals or species in the United States and environs had become extinct this year in 2021. And I found out that 23 species have become extinct in the US. And 2 of those are the ivory-billed woodpecker and Bachman's warbler. They became extinct due to habitat loss and to collection. So I'd like our candle tonight to be a candle of remembrance for the ivory-billed woodpecker and Bachman's warbler, and then I will have a prayer. Let us pray. O God, who created everything, we come to you with joy and thanksgiving for the animals around us, the pests that live in our homes, and for the wild animals that live in our yards and in the forest. We take such delight in the beautiful birds that feed us and the squirrels and other small creatures that play in the grass and among the trees. They are a source of endless and captivating pleasure. We can see your wise hand at work in these beautiful and engaging creatures, for each animal has a specific purpose and helps maintain the balance of nature. Let us partner with you in caring for their needs. Bless them and help us live with them peacefully and kindly. Amen.
Amen.
May it be so. Thank you, Jean. That was beautiful. I'd like to introduce Dr. Joanne Kahn. This is a really exciting evening. She's a faculty member and sustainability advisor at the University of Richmond. She has become well known as a vegan, animal, and environmental advocate around the globe. She's given presentations not only in the US, but also in Germany, Canada, India, Norway, Spain, and Italy. Could everyone please mute if you're not speaking now? Thank you. Her TEDx talk, The Power of Plant-Based Eating, has almost 1 million views. She is the editor of Vegan Voices, Essays by Inspiring Changemakers. She appears in the powerful documentary, Eating Our Way to Extinction, which is really powerful. And she's profiled in the book, Legends of Change, about vegan women who are changing the world. She's an award-winning classical pianist. Dr. Kahn draws upon a diversity of skills as a writer, speaker, and creative artist in her advocacy activities. She has a stated goal, quote, to plant the seeds of awareness and compassion wherever I go, end quote. We are extremely fortunate that she is here tonight to share these wonderful skills and plant the seeds of awareness and compassion within us. May we provide fertile ground for those seeds to take root and flourish. So thank you, Joanne, and take it away.
Thank you, Loretta. Let me try to share my screen. I'd like to thank UUCF and Act for Climate Today, and Loretta, thank you so much. I've come to know you over the past year, and your advocacy, all your tireless efforts are making such a difference. So I'm just so glad to be here tonight to share some thoughts and reflections with you in a presentation that's titled, The Act of Courageous Compassion That Can Heal Our World. I'm here to tell you the single most important action we must take individually and collectively as a global society in order to heal the planet. It is the most powerful choice of our time to ensure the sustainability of our beautiful Earth and its inhabitants. And it's about embracing the most basic quality that lies at the core of our identity, our sense of compassion. So why the words courageous compassion? Because this choice asks us to open our eyes, hearts, and minds to question an aspect of our lives that is accepted and deeply ingrained in most of our society. Because this is a bold call to the world community and global leaders to openly acknowledge and bring to the very forefront of our collective awareness the single most destructive industry that humankind engages in. The choice we must make is to end the exploitation of non-human animals. Tonight, I'll talk about the challenges we face in terms of ingrained cultural practices, the perceptions of animals held by society as a whole, and how animal agriculture is deeply tied to the crisis we are facing with climate change. But I will also address the power of our choices to be vegans and the positive developments that are already changing the world. 107 billion. That's the total number of humans who have ever lived on this earth. Yet every single year, we kill at least 80 billion land animals and 3 trillion sea animals, mostly for food, but also through the entertainment, research, and clothing industries. This is the greatest crime of humanity. It's an amount of suffering, violence, and death so enormous that it defies comprehension, constituting the most atrocious and heartless acts ever inflicted upon a group of living beings. And it is committed with indifference on a massive scale every second of every day. How is it that this is normal and accepted as a part of our reality? The path of human culture has followed a long trajectory, from our early existence as hunter-gatherers to the growth of tribal and agrarian societies. We know that the origins of animal agriculture can be traced back to roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago. Prior to that, early man existed as foragers, nomadic, opportunistic eaters, gathering, hunting, and scavenging for food. Man coexisted with animals in a complex web of life, highly observant of their unique abilities and behaviors, and fascinated by the powers they seem to hold. But as our culture developed, a shift in this relationship began to take place. Along with a rise in population, people began to abandon nomadic lifestyles, seeking and settling in places where food, shelter, and land for growing crops were available. Agriculture slowly took hold, as did the concept of ownership, not only of land, but of animals as well, beginning with cattle, sheep, and goats. This marked a critical change in our perceptions of animals. We began seeing them not as kindred spirits, but as commodities, objects, even tools for our use. The ultimate rise of urbanization and consumerism, which shaped the foundations of our modern culture, served to only reinforce this view of animals, that they are units of production within industries whose sole goals are efficiency and profit. What we may see as an inevitable path of human progress and expansion has not been without consequence, and deep shifts in perceptions that have truly deteriorated the fundamental, vital connections we have to the natural world. The systematized violence of factory farms denies the validity of another living being's interest in living. Reinforced even if subconsciously through pervasive social, economic, and cultural conditioning, and false assumptions that it is necessary to exploit animals. Yet all animals, human and non-human, we are equals. We humans are not superior to anything or anyone. And our fellow animals are not beneath us. Gazing into an animal's eyes, we must never cease to be awed as we recognize the same life energy that we hold so preciously within ourselves. Think about it. We share all the behaviors and intentions that define what it means to be sentient. We desire to live free from pain, to have adequate nourishment and shelter, communicate and socialize in our unique ways, protect our young, and if necessary, we will fight for our lives. We animals have families. We seek companionship. We love one another. We play, solve problems. We feel joy, fear, sadness, and we mourn. I love this photo of the dog on the left. How many of you have ever looked deeply into your pet's eyes? And I chose a picture of a pig on the right because when you are face to face with a pig, the first thing that strikes you is that their eyes look so close to human eyes and they are so deeply expressive. And of course, we know that pigs are highly intelligent and emotional beings. So the question is just how courageous must our compassion be? As a global community, we must be courageous enough to acknowledge that our current economic, agricultural, social, and industrial systems have desensitized us to the violence committed against feeling, innocent, vulnerable beings who are just as individual as any of our loved ones and companion animals. Our domination of animals is not a side issue. It is a social justice issue, just as significant as human discrimination, but all the more powerful, for it has become internalized in society's daily customs. Cultural inertia is a powerful force. There is a natural resistance to change what has been established and accepted as the status quo. We derive a sense of security, stability, and even validation from continuing the habits we grew up with. This is especially the case with food. For what we eat is a matter of daily personal habits that can be grounded deeply in family and cultural traditions. At this point, I want to make clear that my statements today are in no way intended to be judgmental or to lay guilt. Through no fault of our own, most of us were born into a meat-eating culture, one which dominates and exploits animals. And I look at my own upbringing. I did not even think about where my food came from until I was a student, a graduate student, and my husband brought home a book called Animal Factories. And our reaction was, how come we never thought about this before? So that was the wake-up call for me. So when you think back to when you were a youngster, we did not actually make a choice that we were going to consume animal flesh. The choice, in essence, was made in our family situation by the upbringing we had in our family situations. So we need to realize that that is the simple reality. And I know that that's true because oftentimes when I do presentations, one of the first questions I'll ask the audience is, how many of you were born vegan? And usually no one raises their hand. So we need to go about our advocacy in as positive a way as possible, instilling in others a greater awareness to think about animals in ways that perhaps people never have before. So realizing that society, as humans grew further and further away from seeing other living beings as our equals, we adopted, even if on a subconscious level, false beliefs, such as that consuming animals is necessary for good health, and that there is some kind of hierarchical food chain that requires us to eat them despite our clearly herbivorous physiology. Loretta mentioned a new book that I published called Vegan Voices, and one of the essays is by Jesse Tandler. He's one of the coordinators for the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, and he made a very interesting statement in his essay where he says, when I grew up eating animals, I felt that animals tasted like I was supposed to eat them. So that shows how ingrained and accepting we have been as young people growing up in this meat-centric culture. So we also adopted this egocentric view that humans are superior to other animals and that it's acceptable to abuse or kill them for our own needs. Most of society is so indoctrinated in these attitudes that it never even occurs to a lot of people to question them. So we must release ourselves from the grip of ingrained perceptions that we can love some animals, yet treat others as if they were an unfeeling, unintelligent mass of things meant only for our use and the very brief satisfaction of our taste buds. And we must open our eyes to the simplest of truths, that it pains us to see another being suffer. We must dare to be aware, and we must not look away. For how can we deny to an other those instinctive emotions lying at the very heart of who we are, widening our circles of empathy, sensitivity, and kindness, truly the greatest gifts we can give to any living being, will become a powerful force for change. We can take the courageous path, as so many of you have done, of putting our inner convictions and values at the center of our lives in so many diverse ways that reflect each of our own unique and individual journeys. We can seize the realization that change begins within us and that our choices will make a positive change in the world. Of course, that's not to say that it's going to be easy, but each of us can be change makers. I have a couple of quotes to share. How many of you know Emily Moran Barwick? She has the amazing website, Bite Size Vegan, and she educates people all around the globe about healthier food choices and the crisis we're facing with lack of compassion to our fellow beings. But she says, each and every one of us has the ability to affect change. You have the power to affect change. It just takes a decision to act, a decision to not look away, a decision to come closer. Never doubt the power you have and the even greater power we have when we come together at a grassroots level. Stop waiting for someone to do something and be that someone. I love that quote of Emily. She's absolutely fantastic. Our vegan bravery is about so many things. We've brought ourselves to full conscious awareness, the horrific injustices brought against animals, suffering, cruelty, and violence that most people refuse to see. We've opened ourselves up to making changes in our own lives, not only concrete changes like our diets and the clothes we wear, but a deepening sense of spirituality and new perceptions in identity and how we see ourselves in relation to other living beings and the natural world that surrounds us. I remember that when I first went vegetarian and then ultimately vegan, for me, it was a real deep inner spiritual transformation where I just felt more of a center of calmness and peace with myself. And I know others have had the same kind of experience, but the benefits, oftentimes people initially go plant-based for dietary reasons, but it's really something that's so much more. And I really am hoping that on my journey that I'll come to realize that even more than I realize. We vegans embrace the meaning of compassion in a uniquely powerful way. And this is against a world that has become increasingly materialistic, divisive, and egocentric. Our bravery is that we live our ethical choices to lessen the suffering of others, even as we experience immense sadness, emotional pain, and even despair in the face of a still mostly non-vegan world. Our courage is that we choose a path that we feel and know to be right for ourselves, even though it can open us up to conflict and resistance, even from family and friends. We dare to hope that the world will awaken to a new level of compassionate awareness. And we're bravely taking a stand and spreading our message. Even though it's not happening quickly enough for us, veganism is one of the fastest growing social justice issues of our time, and we know it's growing into the mainstream. A couple more quotes to share. I'm sure most of you have seen Gary Yourofsky's greatest speech ever given on YouTube. He says, "It is not your right, based on your traditions, your customs, and your habits, to deny animals their freedom so you can harm them, enslave them, and kill them. That's not what rights are about. That's injustice." And we all know Dr. Will Tuttle, who says, "There is no way to overstate the magnitude of the collective spiritual transformation that will occur when we shift from food of violent oppression to food of gentleness and compassion." Around the world, we're seeing more and more people standing up for animal liberation. This is a Cube of Truth by Anonymous for the Voiceless taking place in Germany. So many people bearing witness, animal rescues. We're seeing more and more public demonstrations against factory farms and the other industries that exploit animals, and rising awareness that the consumption of animals and animal products is damaging to our physical and spiritual well-being. The mass cruelty committed against our fellow beings can no longer be ignored, for at the deepest level, it is a self-inflicted wound upon our true innate nature that is grounded in compassion. I believe that there will be a time in the future when society looks back upon animal exploitation as a moral atrocity. Moving beyond the acceptance of force and violence used against others will enable us to envision and create a world of greater peace and equality among all beings. And we must be courageous enough to acknowledge this inconvenient truth, that our exploitation of animals is destroying the planet as we know it. It is the single most destructive industry that humankind engages in, whose direct relevance to our global challenges has largely been overlooked, being, as it were, the proverbial elephant in the room. Yes, it's true that in October of 2018, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change stated that the climate crisis demands, quote, rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented change in all aspects of society, unquote. And over 10 years ago, the UN's Environment Assessment Program stated the following in its report titled Assessing the Environmental Impacts of Consumption and Production, quote, A substantial reduction of impacts would only be possible with a substantial worldwide diet change away from animal products, unquote. Yet, in a serious oversight, the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, yes, I read the entire report, made no mention of the enormous negative consequences of animal agriculture. As some of you know, last October, the UN held a climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland, and this was a headline, "Menu at COP26, mocked by client activists over meat and fish selection." So the delegates were still consuming animal products. In fact, animal agriculture didn't even make it onto the agenda. As Peter Singer, philosopher at Princeton University and author of the groundbreaking book, Animal Liberation, has noted, quote, "The kind of secret source of greenhouse gas emissions that no politicians are talking about at the moment are the emissions that come from the livestock industry," unquote. While cutting emissions from energy and transportation and making a decisive shift away from fossil fuels to renewable and alternative energies are vitally necessary, this will not be enough to successfully combat climate change, especially in light of projections that global meat consumption could rise as much as 75% by 2050 due to population growth, urbanization, and rising incomes. The one major global initiative that will have more rapid and greater effect is to bring about planetary healing through a profound transformation of our food production systems, in particular, ending the mass killing of animals for food. Ilmi Granoff, who is director of sustainable finance at Climate Works Foundation, says the following, quote, "Forget cars, forget coal. The fastest way to address climate change would be to dramatically reduce the amount of meat people eat," unquote. You can cut your carbon footprint in half by going vegan. Industrial animal agriculture is a major driver of climate change. It is the #1 cause of species and habitat loss and the leading cause of environmental degradation, from water and air pollution to ocean dead zones, catastrophic deforestation, soil erosion, and desertification. The massive inefficiency of using animals as a food source has led to severe resource depletion, and the diversion of nearly half of global crops to feed livestock instead of people is a direct cause of world hunger. As Gary Yourofsky says, eat plant foods, stop using the animal as a filter. We know that the consequences of animal agriculture are growing and staggering and unprecedented in human history. Up to 1 million plant and animal species now face extinction. We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction due to human activity. Addressing these devastating impacts should be front and center, yet they remain largely ignored by the general public, policy leaders, mainstream media, and even some environmentalists. The resistance and inability to act reflect just how deeply the consumption and abuse of animals have become embedded and normalized, accepted as though it were a concrete, unchangeable reality. Society is constantly conditioned to remain comfortably disconnected from the industrialized violence and environmental destruction that lie invisibly behind its consumer choices. In essence, we're taught to not feel, to not be aware, to not look deeply within and question Is this who we are? Is this what we want our legacy to be? So implementing solutions will depend on our willingness to question an industry that is destructive on so many levels. We've simply grown out of balance with the natural world and have reached a point of crisis. We need to realize that this is not just, a call like an alarm of what we're doing to the planet. It gives us this extraordinary opportunity. We need to realize that we're at an inflection point and our greatest achievements now lie before us, meeting these challenges with the best qualities of our nature, our perseverance, our adaptability, drive, intellect, inventiveness, optimism, and our deep capacity for love and compassion. Our collective purpose will be nothing less than a broad-scale intervention for the health of the planet. We must be bold enough to assert that our actions will be a revolutionary kindness, a turning point to advance the evolution of humankind forward, away from the exploitation of the natural world as if it were inexhaustible and its inhabitants expendable. It would be so easy to do nothing, right? But we are part of this earth. We're not separate from it. In bringing great harm to the living planet and our kindred beings, we're only harming ourselves. To continue to be complacent and indifferent will be at our own peril. So our global mandate must be to undertake a major transition from the consumption of animals and animal products to plant-sourced foods. The good news here is that we're seeing positive moves in that direction, which are more than just short-term trends. Even independent of global policy initiatives to mitigate climate change, the tremendous rise in business and investment opportunities in the plant-based food market, as well as growing consumer demands for healthier food options and cruelty-free products, will be powerful driving forces for increased environmental sustainability and what I think will be the inevitable decline of the livestock industry. We all know about the exploding market for meat alternatives like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, which has led analysts to predict that the industry will be worth nearly $150 billion in a decade. All you need to do is take a trip to your local grocery store to see the tremendous change and availability of plant-based products, even in just the past 5 years. Even top global meat conglomerates have seen the writing on the wall. Tyson Foods, for example, is already debuting plant-based products. Their CEO, Noel White, has stated that plant-based foods will be the future. And he says, it is coming, and we will do it in a significant way. We can truly create a new era and identity for food that is nourishing, sustainable, and compassionate. We end the horrors of industrial animal farming and the decimation of our oceans, halt the devastating destruction of the rainforests that provide habitats for at least half of the world's plant and animal life. And we embark on a large-scale mission to regenerate our forests, soil, and vegetation. As stewards of the earth, we can seize the opportunity to restore biodiversity, our rivers, oceans, and our precious air, reduce global disease, and turn the tide on world hunger. What we achieve must be a unified global effort towards common goals, subsidies, investments, and financial incentives redirected from meat production to plant foods, support for new food products and technologies, And our tremendous spirit of innovation will be key to our survival. Improvements in crop management and irrigation practices, the expansion of organic and veganic farming, accelerated development of eco-friendly techniques such as vertical farming, hydroponics and aeroponics, the replacement of slaughterhouses with greenhouses, aggressive reductions in the use of chemical fertilizers, implementing programs and policies to reduce food waste, solutions to the problems of access in food deserts, and continued advocacy that animals must never be exploited, whether for food, entertainment, for research, clothing, cosmetics, and other consumer products. We will meet these challenges as we redefine what is of true value in our lives, not wealth, ownership, perpetual growth, social status, competition, and material gain, but powerful choices we cultivate within us, motivating us to realize our highest potential and the greatest good. Compassion, love, sensitivity, gratitude for our planet, seeing ourselves in every living being, and the desire to lessen the suffering of others. Now is the time to bring about healing through a profound transformation of awareness, a restored sense of kinship, stewardship, and connection to nature and all living beings. Ending the devastating cruelty of animal agriculture will be the world's greatest act of kindness and a testament to our true natures as we bring our lives into greater harmonious alignment with the earth. I'd like to conclude with a quote by Einstein, which is coming up shortly here. He says, "Our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. The true value of a human being is determined by the measure and the sense in which, the sense in which they have obtained liberation from the self. We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if humanity is to survive." I believe that our courageous compassion can heal the world. Thank you. And I do also want to mention, this slide came up quickly. If you don't already know about a new book that I edited that came out last fall called Vegan Voices, Essays by Inspiring Change Makers, which includes essays by over 50 vegans and advocates from all around the world. And it's a wonderful collection and a great resource and a gift to give to any folks who are leaning towards plant-based eating. So I guess at this point, I'll turn it back to Loretta and stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanne. That was just so inspiring. I can feel that compassion, that love, that caring that we all need to embrace and live more fully. Could you tell us, I'll go through the chat in a minute, but could you suggest one or two concrete actions each of us, those of us who are moving, want to move towards a more plant-based diet, those of us who are already fully vegan and would like to encourage others without shaming or judging, or just some concrete suggestions on how we might go further in our journey.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One thing I learned from the process of putting my book together is that people are gifted in so many unique ways. So I think vegans, look at all the things you can do. Some people feel that they're really great at public speaking. Others like to volunteer, maybe at a local veg fest. Others like to blog. They like to cook. They like to create a vegan coaching site or do tabling, leafletting. There are so many ways that that we can contribute. You don't have to be a so-called expert. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a scientist. Every single person, we all can find the unique way that we can spread the message. It may even be something as simple as going to the grocery store and wearing a vegan t-shirt. You know, there are just so many ways that we plant these seeds of awareness. And the other thing is through food. If you have any opportunity to go to some kind of, you know, it could be a community picnic or a gathering or a meetup of folks, a church gathering where, you know, not necessarily are all those people leaning towards plant-based, but to simply show folks how absolutely delicious vegan food can be, because that can be a real conversation starter. Someone will say, wow, that lasagna was amazing. Can I have the recipe? And you say, oh yeah, sure, I'll share the recipe. By the way, it's all plant-based and it's super healthy. And I'll also give a third piece of advice. Just continue to be yourself. You know, be the wonderful model of health and bright energy and kindness, because I really feel that when we put that kind of energy out in our interactions with others, it really affects people, it touches people, and they're really inspired by just the person that you are. So I hope those tips will be helpful.
I think there's so many things that are possible. Does anyone have a question?
I'm looking at the chat too.
There are comments, and on this, I don't know if you're familiar with our 8 principles, but it is a question of our 8th principle has to do with dismantling oppressive systems of oppression. And you know, certainly speciesism is one of the greatest systems of oppression, and it's so interrelated, interconnected. You know, how do we convey that so that we can get our congregations of faith to, you know, not badger their members to become vegan, but as an organization to stand up for the principles that are so core to our beliefs?
I think it really comes down to not having this, there's almost this kind of invisible wall between humans and non-human animals. And we simply need to create this sense of whole community of animals, that we're all in this together, right? We're all in the same boat. We're all on the same planet. We all have the same qualities and emotional feelings. We all have an interest in living. And to point out that, you know, when you look at what's happening with climate change and the environment, truly by bringing harm to another being, it's coming back to us. That old adage, how does it go? Like what you put out, you know, you get in return, or something like that. So I think adopting a very universal language of just world compassion and celebrating and seeing just how beautiful every single living being is. And I think that can be done in a very positive kind of way. Asking people to say, you know, have you thought of visiting this, you know, there might be a local animal sanctuary, spend some time with the animals and see what you think. And oftentimes people come back and they're transformed. They didn't realize that these animals were unique individuals and that they're full of love and light. And I think any, you know, steps that lead people in the right direction, so they realize these things for themselves instead of telling them things.
So true. There is an example of what one woman has started in the African American community, Finance Yahoo. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. Whoever, Diana, could you talk about that? Tell us about it.
Oh, yeah, it was it was on the news. It was featured on, I think, CBS one morning, and it was one African American woman. And I have found that African Americans are really keying into the spiritual nature of eating, they call it cleanly, without violence. And one woman put together a campaign called the first time I tried to share, the chat messed it all up, but I re-entered. It's called the what is it called? The one, well, if you click on the link, you find it. It's the 1 million Black women vegans, and it is they are trying to get
Yes.
1 million women per year, with a 10-year goal of 10 million, and that is to do a heroic job in explaining veganism to the African American community, and it's really, really catching on.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I do remember seeing that story, although I didn't read it. But yeah, that's so important that, you know, we're making headway in all areas of our society. And that reminds me of an African American activist, Gwenna Hunter, who's in Los Angeles. And she does these weekly events where she goes to some of the disadvantaged and poorer communities, brings fresh vegetables and fruits, plant-based foods. She does educational activities, and she's a tireless advocate. Every weekend, she's educating people about the power of eating plants. And so, as I said before, it's, you know, the grassroots level, this is really where it's at, because you look at the government and policies at the large level, they're always going to be slow to move, and they're sensitive, of course, to all of the undercurrent of, you know, lobbying and the government support of meat subsidies and the dairy industry. You know, we're up against all of that. So truly, the most powerful things we can do are things in our community and what we do individually as vegans. So thanks so much for bringing up that article. I'll be sure to read that. Thanks.
There's a question. You have been so positive in your presentation. Can you name one or two others who are also positive in encouraging veganism?
Oh gosh, there are so many. Boy, that's a really hard question. One woman that comes to mind is Ray Sikora. Do all of you know of her? She lives in the Southwest. She's actually one of the authors in Vegan Voices, but she's one of these people that always, yeah, she's in the book, is always about finding and seeing the good in other people. And she does it in such a positive way, and points out in her essay how oftentimes we are quick to judge other people, but that we should always seek the good and connect to the good in others. And that's a super, super powerful message, and it's so positive. Another person I know, Lynn Sylvan, she's one of these grassroots organizers. She runs an organization in Oregon called the Eugene Veg Education Network. And she doesn't even use social media. She's at her computer answering emails from all around the world because her network is international. So it's people like that who are doing the day in, day out, answering questions, making people aware, educating them, giving them resources. Those people do amazing, amazing things. Another person is Claudia Lifton, who I think is with one of the humane education organizations. I'm not exactly sure. She used to be with the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, and she's spoken to thousands and thousands of school kids. And to think of the impact that she has had among our young people is really, really inspiring. I mean, there are just so many. Let's see. Oh, another one is someone I know here in Richmond. His name is Derek Treesize, and he is a pro bodybuilder. And he tells a story about how when he was growing up, he'd ate he would eat 2 steaks and a gallon of ice cream and all this kind of thing. And then he met his wife to be, who really said, hey, you've got to eat healthy. And she turned him around. And now he trains and has clients who are going out and winning all of these bodybuilding contests and everything. So he's a great example of someone who, once he's made that transition, is just so stoked and motivated to go out and spread the message. So there are just so many people. I mean, you, Loretta, you are one of the most positive people I know too. Yeah.
Your inspiration is just so energizing and motivating. The way you've been in so many groups and so many talks. There.
I have a question. I was glad to hear you say that first you were a vegetarian. I mean, I'm struggling to get to that point right now myself. And I also, the fact that you said we're grown up with these food habits. And they're so hard. They're so hard for me to get rid of. I make a big meal every night for my 2 sons that live with me. And, they just, I can't think of things to feed them besides the usual typical meat. And I said, we're cutting down on meat. And they said, oh, well, what do we have instead? And I'm having trouble finding different things. So I'm not as far along as everybody else is here. I'm really having a hard time just cutting down on meat, cutting back.
So I would suggest, sometimes people have this idea of veganism, and they see people who speak a lot and write all these books, and Dr. Greger, and they kind of see, it's easy to see being vegan as kind of like this state of perfection,
Right.
like you have to get there, like it's this fixed goal. But really, it's not that. What it is you're continuing on this journey. Kind of imagine you're going down a path. And, maybe the path turns a little bit, maybe it goes this way, maybe not everyone is ready to be vegan in your family. That's okay. Take small steps. Like one thing I have is a notebook with super duper vegan recipes that everybody loves. You do a lot of experimentation. It's fun. And there are so many websites and cookbooks out there. If you can develop a repertoire of, say, 10 vegan dinners.
But I'm still working on the vegetarian part. I've got to get through that first.
So then do it for vegetarian,
I'm not even sure exactly all the things that vegans can and cannot eat, even though I have 2 friends who are vegan. And I'm sure when I do get to that point, I'll be able to get some things from them. But
so if you're vegetarian, you're not actually consuming animal flesh. Is that correct? That's your goal?
I still am, but not as much.
Not as much.
I mean, I think your idea of trying to get to know the animals you're eating might work. Because when I was a kid, my father won this little piglet in a contest. And he gave him to his brother who lived on a farm. And we'd go visit Oinky, real original, every Sunday. And Oinky got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, after several months, or maybe it was a couple of years, we stopped seeing him so often. He was getting really big. And all of a sudden, we had all this ham and pork and bacon that you could imagine. And, it just dawned on me. I said, is this Oinky? And I've never been able to eat anything from a pig since. And so, but I never met a cow that I liked, so I'm having trouble with that part. Anyway, it's just
but I would encourage, small steps. It could be, like I said, come up with, if you go online and say, type in veganize mac and cheese or vegetarian version of mac and cheese, and just try lots of different recipes. You'll find some that you really like and others that you don't like. and just kind of start. Maybe you have like a meatless Mondays. Maybe once you
Yes.
have a good repertoire, say to your family, hey, let's start out by having vegetarian Mondays and see how it goes, and kind of go week to week and then slowly build up from there.
I guess just the fact that I really am seriously going to do it is a good step, first step.
Yeah. And so many resources out there. Any other suggestions from anyone else?
One thing that can be really helpful is just adding in vegetable dishes. Not thinking about what I can't eat, but thinking, oh, I might like to try that jackfruit or those portobello mushrooms with tomato sauce and the plant-based cheese, and they make wonderful, wonderful. And Carol, you had your hand up there.
Another idea?
Now, Carol, you're muted. I can't hear you. Carol's talking, but I can't hear you, Carol. You're muted. Oh, well. I can't get it.
While Carol is unmuting herself, can I say there are a lot of different kind of national cuisines that lend themselves to vegan or vegetarian. I mean, if you think about Italian food, all you basically need you need some kind of pasta and you need some kind of red sauce. And you can add any vegetables that you want to that. You could add mushrooms if you saute mushrooms and mix that in with a red sauce. Mushrooms are really meaty in texture and taste, or bell peppers, or carrots and onions, and just about any vegetable you can think of mixed with red sauce and put over any kind of pasta is, in my book, fabulous. And Indian cuisine or Mexican,
I like that.
you start out with rice and beans. In my humble opinion, you don't really need anything else, but you can add any kind of vegetable that you would think of to basically rice and beans. And if you get some of the fancier kind of rice varieties from Whole Foods or whatever, Lundberg has like a wild blend that has 4 or 5 different kinds of rice, and it's just fabulous. I usually make it with veggie broth and a little bit of vinegar and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's the rice itself is fabulous. And then pretty much anything with that. I mean, either even just opening a can of beans, black beans or red beans, or you name it, and then just go from there. We make pizzas with no cheese. You just get we use lavash, which is like a flat round thing, but you can buy pizza shells that are made for pizza, and you spread a bunch of red sauce on that, and then onions and tomatoes and peppers and mushrooms and whatever you think of, and put that in the oven for a few minutes at 475 or something, and you have a lovely pizza. You don't even need cheese. I mean, they do have vegan cheeses in the store that are not bad at all, but you don't even really need cheese on a pizza. So anyway, I mean, I think there's, when you start, but somebody said Google vegan recipes or something, and I think once you start going down that rabbit hole, there's all kinds of options. So,
And you can also bid on the vegan dinner that Raju and Lisa and Michael and I are auctioning off for this Saturday. Carol, I see you're unmuted because we're going to need to go to our business meeting, but did you want to?
Yeah, so I was going to say that there are a lot of products like in your grocer's freezer. I mean, I shop at Giant a lot. I also shop at Whole Foods, but you can get meatballs, meatless meatballs that are fantastic. It tastes like, you swear to God, you're eating beef. So some people have a hard time transitioning away from favorite foods and familiar foods, but if some of these, like chicken nuggets that are in the freezer, and you put them in your air fryer, and they taste like chicken nuggets, but they're plant-based. So I mean, it helps people make that transition to feeling like they're eating, their favorite foods or traditional foods, and they're feeling satisfied along with their wonderful vegetable and plant-based others. And another thing I was going to say, that comment where we have to know how our meat is produced and we can't look away. The thing that, besides you and Mike, who helped me transition, I would get these videos from PETA, and I would just almost cry. I mean, why are they doing this to me? Well, you can't look away, and once you know, then you have to do something. Like I can't look at the meat counter anymore without realizing that was some muscle on some poor rump of a beef, a cow or whatever. It's not just it's bodies and cadavers cut up. I mean, I think of it that way, and it's like most people, they're not because they don't know how the beef gets there or the animal products. They don't live in or visit a slaughterhouse. It's just this nice meat package in the grocers, meat chest, and it just makes a big difference if you know how your meat starts out. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, you can do it for the environment or do it, but the thing is, it's this horror show of slaughter. It's just heartbreaking, and I mean, I was at the Giant. I go to the Giant a lot, but anyway, look at the lobster tank. I can't even look at them and make eye contact with the lobsters. I want to set them free, but of course, they're headed for the steam pot. I mean, it's just you think of the cruelty that we visit on these poor animals in good cuisine for us. It's terrible.
And I think it's also a good point to bring up why we want to look away, why people don't want to look at all this graphic footage and things like that. Think of it as your reaction is showing you your kindness, what a compassionate, loving person you are. And that's why you're reacting that way, And so I think that, seeing that footage can actually help you to tie into
Yeah, definitely.
kindness. And I think that's.
So what does that say about people who do look away and they don't want to hear anything about them?
Oh, it's the same thing because they know it's painful. And they know at some deep level that this is an unkind thing to do to this other being. And it's like they don't want to face it.
And people used to say, well, animals don't feel pain like we do. But we know that's not true.
One of the most, I think, clever things that Joanne did in one of her presentations was to show videos of people watching the videos of the animal cruelty. And it's exactly what you're describing. You could see the pain, the anguish on people's face because it's not our nature. Our natures are compassionate. And so I think that's a step towards where people, it's excruciating to watch the suffering of animals, but to see the suffering we cause ourselves in the treatment of animals can be transformative too. And I hate to cut this off, but we do have to get to a business meeting, our last one of the year. Joanne, thank you so much.
Loretta and everyone for coming and for setting it up. So great to be with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.
So, Eric, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay.